Hi, friends. I hope you're well. I'm struggling with technology. I'm trying to get this coursework up for you. I'm speaking on natural immunity and moving it into a place where I feel is so important right now. And I thought if I can't get it moving, we might have to do it this way. So bear with me. I'm working on it from a point of view. Let me just see if I can move this forward. Just 1 minute. Okay, it's not gonna let me do this easily. I did get it on the screen. That's a positive. So let's just do it like this for a minute and see if I can continue to show you a little bit. I'm trying to think if I can do it this way. That might work. Yay. Okay, I think it might work. I'm just gonna have to go in and out. So I started this topic in natural immunity to be able to open up to the possibilities of my own personal experience, my own relationship to raising kids without antibiotics, without using artificial means in my life. And I wanted to discover a little bit on how we as a humanity can start looking at natural immunity. It's a really important topic right now. And if we don't really take a stand for it, I feel like we're at a crossroads, right? The country is divided here in America. I think as far as the globe, we're divided. We're divided as a society. Technology is changing rapidly. Artificial intelligence is changing rapidly. Science is changing rapidly. Relationships are changing rapidly. Relationships in the whole context of what we're facing is changing rapidly. Natural immunity for me is maybe something different than what you think natural immunity might be. So this will be a coursework that will be a paid presentation. You're getting this for free today as a start to the work that I'm going to do for the whole fall. I'm going to do this throughout the next 6 months probably, because it's a really important study and it's a really important thing for us to discuss. And as we as a society move forward, it's exciting to me to see what natural immunity could be for us as a society, as a people. And when we start thinking about natural immunity, we tend to think from a science point of view in a little box, and we don't go wider. And so when I started thinking about this topic, and people were coming to me and asking me, what do you think? How do you feel around some of the decisions that are being made? And, I had so many people asking, right? I am a global thought leader. I tend to direct my thinking to our local region right now, most of it, although I work deeply in different regions. I worked a year ago. My name is Lynn Chittick, and I worked a year ago as for many years in the past through UN work. I've joined my local chapter, hoping to be on the board. My daughter just went through a serious accident, so I got held up a little bit from a few different things. I'm praying so deeply for her. So thank you all for your prayers. Anyone that's here that has supported her on her fundraiser for the medical costs, it's huge. So we really appreciate your support as well as a family. So with further ado, I'm just going to grab my phone and I'll be right with you. And I want my phone to be able to share this out. So I'm asking you as a community, please share this. Please share this as I start this talk. It's an important talk. It's an important witness to how we as a society, we as a people, we as a community can support one another in this next phase of our existence on the planet. So let me grab my phone. There. I just want to be able to share it out on Facebook because for me, natural immunity, natural immunity is such a beautiful gift of our soul life, our relational life, our connection, our connectedness, our witness, our wisdom, our beauty, our love, our care for one another, our care as a humanity with one another. Natural immunity is what we've been given. And many of you have heard me in this conversation that our heart beats. When we wake up in the morning, our heart is beating, or you wouldn't be here right now. That's natural immunity. And for me, that's called nature. So when we think about nature and we think about relationship, thank you, Naheem, for being on. We think about nature. Nature herself is what we are. We are of nature. Some of you have seen my video around food. And when we put food in here, food comes back out. It comes from many different layers and understanding of our human nature. So natural immunity to me is going to be discussed through an understanding of transmutation and understanding from a little bit different layer of connected relationships. Relationship with nature, relationships with each other, relationships of how we were born, relationships of how we were brought into this world, relationships of how we were brought into religions by our birthright. Our birth was, we were born into a relationship. We were born into a place. Some say that we had a choice to be born into a Christian family, into an Islam family, into a Buddhist family, into a Hindu family. We were chosen from the other side, from this idea. Now, some of you know I've talked a lot about the other side because for me, there's been a witness of experience, of understanding, of commitment. So natural immunity comes to me from many different ways of thinking about nature. And natural immunity in a scientific way is about the immunity of our science behind nature. Nature has tried to be understood by chemistry, philosophy, physiological, theological, there's many ideas around nature, right? Geologically, the list goes on, as you all know. The list goes on with nature and understanding nature, because we as a people have seen it this way, because we've been born into a time frame, 2021. This is 2021. We've gone over the 2000. I was born in 1959. I was born in the middle of many different things, including right after the Tibetan transition. People were kicked out of Tibet. I was born into the place after World War II, where my father had been in the war. So he had been traumatized from his own experience. He had to leave college because his father died in college. And so he had to leave college and go home and take care of his family farm. He was from Canada via Ireland. So my dad came from Ireland over to America via Canada, over to Canada, to the United States. And I wonder, and I have the curiosity and I have the passion, the three things that I actually teach about in the Torch, my organization Torch, the organization for realizing change in humanity. It's our organization because it's not based on an individual ownership. It's a shared leadership platform of entrepreneurs that has been magic and in relatedness with each other, in relationship with each other, in understanding each other and opening to each other. And as I speak, my beautiful Haji Khan Faroch is sharing from Pakistan, and he's doing a live right this minute as we speak. And when I think about Pakistan and how did this woman from America get to Pakistan, there's layers upon layers. It's kind of like my dad moving from Ireland to Canada to America, to leaving college, going through the Air Force. What was his experience as a human being? My mother, she was born to a family in Maine, the Nickerson family. Her great-grandmother was Native American, and she was not to discuss her grandmother. Her and her cousins were not able to talk about the grandmother. What was that for my mother? What was that hidden message for my mother? So I have two parents that came into this world with their immunity, their natural immunity compromised. Their natural immunity compromised from just living and being born into families that all that happened. So that's the start of my talk. I want you today to just make a little geography of your own family genealogy and think about your family. That's our number one. I want you to think about your family unit and your relationship to your family and your genealogy, okay? Because without that, we're not looking at where we've come from. And if we think about our parents, to our grandparents, to our great-great-grandparents, to our great-great-great-grandparents, onward, we wonder what are in our cells, what are in the cellular knowing. I recently came upon a doctor that studies cells, and so he'll be part of this talk on natural immunity because I'll study him this fall. I'm very excited about him because he talks about nature and our cells knowing. And natural immunity, I believe, is about our cells and our cellular knowing. And there's this beautiful understanding by Michio Kushi, who taught me a lot about cellular knowing. And I was so excited to find a doctor, current 2021, that's teaching that our cells know. So you can Google that. You can find out yourself. It's not rocket science, but I'm pulling together some ideas today that you might want to look into your family genealogy. You might want to look into your cellular knowing and your relationship to cellular knowing. Okay? I have one more thing I need to grab. I'm going to grab some water. With the technology happening, I wasn't able to prepare myself. I'm actually going to light a candle. For me, a candle is about getting a focus. And I send this light to you. So it'll be on my table during these discussions today. So I've already brought forward a couple of things for you to look at. Genealogy and geography is the next topic. Where were you born in the physicality? Were you born in a cold climate, a warm climate, a hot climate? Did you have seasons? Did you not have seasons? Did you have an understanding of summer, winter, or did you have summer, fall, winter, spring? Was it rainy? Was it not? How is your infrastructure, and what my book is about, the infrastructure of your geography? So now I've talked about genealogy, and we're going to go moving into geography. What was your geography growing up? What was the climate you were born into? It makes a huge difference in your natural immunity. And if you've moved from that natural geography to another climate, to another space and time, like my father did, coming from Ireland to Canada to America. Canada and America are very similar in seasonal change, so I don't think that was a huge change. But geography, as far as infrastructure, what was that infrastructure that my father was born into in Canada? Was it, I question it because I've been to Canada where his family was when I was a little girl. We used to go fishing. And we used to go fishing up to Canada, and he would take me to these old farms. And my grandparents actually owned a saltwater farm. Now, what that means is there's a pond, but it was a saltwater spring in the pond itself. What did that mean for my father to be born into that family? On a farm, in a farming community, in an understanding of farming community, in an understanding of his own tradition, in his understanding of his own relationship to that farm, to nature, to understanding his own infrastructure of his geography, being born into a farm. Many of us have been born into farming, but many of us have born into urban life, into cities, into many different areas. So when you look at your infrastructure, and my question, how does your infrastructure affect us? The infrastructure from your own geographical setting the day you were born, your own geographical setting of the space and time you were born. Were you born in the fall? Were you born in the winter? Were you born in the spring? Were you born in the summer? Were you born in the hot season or the cold season? And then I want to ask you, your geography of your own natural immunity is the question I'm having at hand. Were you born into a season? So I was born in July. My mother had to eat food that was of winter. So when she ate food, she was eating food while I was in the womb of warm stews, warm understanding of stew, warm understanding of relationship. Hello, Fatima. Fatima is of the Torch family. She is our torch for the year. We want to support her and understanding. So when I think about natural immunity, we want to look at our geography. So we've looked at genealogy. All right, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, where they've come from. And when we look at understanding of geology, geographical structuring, where you were born into, I want you to go deep and I want you to write down what was your geography in your infrastructure. So Fatima got chosen for the Torch family because she has been doing work in Pakistan from the 4 pillars: peace, health, environment, and tech. And the 4 pillars lives in her work. The first year, Taqwa Ahmed was the Torch. The second year, Haji Khan Faroch. The third year, Pravin Patel from Canada. Taqwa was from Pakistan. Haji Khan Faroch was from Pakistan. Dr. PPP was from India, but lives in Canada, so he had translated. And now Fatima Aziz from a large family. And that's the geography she was born into. She was born into a large family. So that's the next structure I want you to look at. Your infrastructure, your family of origin. Now, studying as a nurse, I've studied a lot about Maslow's hierarchy in healthcare. The Maslow hierarchy of survival. Were you born into a family that had to survive? Were you born into a family that was educated? Were you born into a family that was poor? Were you born into a family that was rich? Were you born into a family that was in need? So your infrastructure of where you were born, plus your placement. Were you the first child, the second child, the third child, the fourth child? Okay, so now we're just starting natural immunity. We've got genealogy. We've got that genealogy idea of where your ancestors came from. We've got your geography of what time and place were you born. Because we're going to open this up in the next few weeks. We're going to open this to discussions, and I will help you understand your own natural immunity through your own infrastructure, because it all makes a difference in your natural immunity. It all makes a difference of how you structure yourself now, your own inner infrastructure. It was so great making this PowerPoint because I got the infrastructure of this technological PowerPoint. And I loved it because it fit into what I could start thinking about so deeply about what I was thinking of technology in itself. So when we look at geography, I've already stated to you that your geography is going to make a huge difference. Your geography on how your climate makes a difference to your natural immunity, how your understanding of geography makes a difference, how your understanding of really your family structure of geography, where your parents had come from, where are they, what type of home you were born into, what type of understanding you were into, what type of understanding your spiritual pathway was born into. Were you born into Islam? Were you born into Christianity? Were you born into Hindu? Were you born into atheists? Were you born into... This is your natural immunity. So when you start structuring your relationship to natural immunity, your infrastructure makes a huge difference. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Pray that I can get it easily. Hang on just a minute. I may step out and step back in, but I'm here. So let's look at this. Okay. All right, our next slide. So when we look at creation, we've kind of just structured from that first slide to this next part, creation. When we think about creation, we think about our coordination of understanding of how we were created. And I gave you just a little inkling of what I think natural immunity can bring to us. When you bring into the structure of being born into a family that has resources or being born into a family that doesn't have resources, what type of infrastructure do you think you had? So I want you to start writing down all of the things from the beginning of this. And if you just joined me, go back and listen, because I've already talked about genealogy, geography, and now we're getting into the second slide. Our livelihood of what we have done, or what our parents have done, or what our great-grandparents have done to bring forward the food on our table, because we've all had to eat, is very key to your natural immunity. Understanding survival in those relationships that your parents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-great-grandparents, what was their survival relationship to cellular knowing? Did they have good relationships? Did they have toxic relationships? Did they have understanding of survival in a way that is not warranted from a place of quality of life? Was their quality of life healthy? And that's, we'll get into this on other coursework along these lines, but our relationships, our survival, and our livelihood all make a difference in our natural immunity. The talk for today, because in creation of our day-to-day living, what we create every day is based on this infrastructure of our livelihood, our survival, and our relationships. And where does our brain go with our livelihood, our survival, and our relationships? Where do we work from our family of origin in our livelihood, our survival, our relationships? Were you one of those people that took off and did your own thing and away from your family? Or did you stay in your family structure and maybe run a family business? Did you go away and create a whole brand new lifestyle? Was it one because you were poor and you wanted to make money? Or were you coming from a rich and you worked with the needy and the poor because you didn't ever see that side because your family was so wealthy? In your relationships, were they bonded in a hierarchical structure? Were your mother in charge? Was your father in charge? Was your grandmother or grandfather in charge of your parents, and that structured you? Were you given a relationship to understanding a quality of life from your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. I want you to start writing down this infrastructure of your relationships because it's key to your natural immunity. It has to be. And so if you came from the city, for instance, and your grandfather was a scientist and his science relationship helped you to get to the college that he was in, so you could understand from that knowing, because science was always discussed in your home. Your science is based on your infrastructure of your grandparents down to you, it might have been from great grandparents to you, to your parents to you. This infrastructure is your natural immunity, because natural immunity comes from that innate nature within ourselves of either survival, either understanding our livelihood and our relationships, because I will discuss it a little bit deeper in this next slide. So let's get to this next slide. Just a minute, I might step out. There we go. Our personal consciousness. Now this one and this technical slide was so perfect because our personal consciousness was structured in all of the things that I've already shared. It's been structured from our genealogy, from our geography, and from our survival and right livelihood, and how you put food on the table, how your grandparents put food on the table, how your great-great-grandparents. And what was that consciousness for them to get their own food, right? So they had food, they had a farm, they had always had plenty of food. They came from poverty, they didn't have food, they had to beg for food, they had nothing. That natural immunity of our brothers and sisters, this is where our consciousness comes into play. What is our brother and sister, and where are they on our scale of life? What did they actually bring into nature, into a natural way of understanding nature, the natural way of immunity? Were they immune from poverty, or were they not immune from poverty? In our mind, in our understanding of taking in our understanding of our hearts, in our understanding of a quality of life, your own personal immunity, your natural immunity, all of this comes into play because it brings us to our own personal consciousness. Our own personal consciousness is where we live from, where we structure ourselves from, where our lives have come from, what our cellular knowing is. Our cellular knowing is our natural immunity. Okay? Next slide. Our personal goals. Now, our personal goals, I structured this with this actual technological understanding of milestones. Our first milestone was a plan. There was a man and a woman involved. And I actually just shared this with somebody. I'm gonna read it. It's a witness of knowing when wisdom is there. And a wisdom meets wisdom. Night and day greet, and man and woman meet. Okay? Your mother and father, wherever they are, whoever they are, in your genealogy, they met. They met maybe from an intellectual place. They met from a spiritual place. They met from a understanding of infrastructure on their own, survival from their own relationships. But in there was a male and female. And out of that, unlike today, many things away from nature now, there's petri dish, small babies now being born. So there's nothing against natural immunity of that, except to find your genealogy across the platform of that. But the first milestone, we can get into that in another forum of this coursework that I'm doing. So your plan was planned, if you believe in incarnation, that you planned to come to your parents, or it was planned from your parents and you came to your parents through this beautiful creation. The initial support system, the initial holding of a child, the initial understanding of being a child in the arms of parents. I found out probably in my 20s that my mother was hospitalized right after my birth. And in the recent years, I've thought a lot about that. That my initial support system was not easy, right? It was not familiar because my mother, who I was in the womb and carried in the womb with, I'm born into the world and thrown out all by myself. So I've always had this feeling, this deep feeling that my own initial support, my first milestone in my personal life, my initial support system, my mother was hospitalized. And I had the person that carried me comfortably in the womb, which I don't really know if she was comfortable or not, but there was most likely a comfort because I was in the womb. In the native tradition, we go to the sweat lodge and we go back to those times of the womb. And they're good places to discover. So when you look at your soul, your deep witness of your initial support. Hello, Wahid, another beautiful, beautiful brother. Here in this picture of Wahid is a group of us from the Torch family. We are equal partners in Torch, and Fatima and Wahid have been here, so I'm eternally grateful for my Torch family. They are in my support from the Torch, from this beautiful light that I have lit for each of you. I carry you deeply in my heart. I love you so much. Give my hugs and love to Saban and Takwa, and please, Riswana. Okay, my love. Okay, back to my talk. It's so nice when we when we have our brothers and sisters here with us when we're teaching or when we're doing something special. So in your first milestone as a human being, natural immunity comes from the plan that your parents had, from the idea of the initial support, and from communication. Were you born into a home of the sacred word of kindness? Were you born into a home with loud speaking? Were you born into a cultural relationship to communication, like, from the Latino families, it's loud and rambunctious and fun, and were you born into that type family? Were you born into a prayerful family? Were you born into a chaotic family? Maybe the grandmother died. Maybe your mother died right after you were born. What was the communication in your home, in that first milestone of your life, in that first tucking in of this deep place? And of course, I will pray for Takwa Ahmed. I am deeply with Takwa every day. So as we open to this relationship, to natural immunity, you have to look at your milestone of support system when you were born. The plan of care that your parents had, Did they own a house? Did they not own a house? Did they try to strive for a house after you were born, or did they not strive? What was that in that early years of your birth? That early years, were you held, or was your mother gone like my mother? My mother was hospitalized right after I was born. I've had this feeling of loneliness my whole life. I've had to go back to that moment because I've had to heal that. I've had to find my own natural immunity. I've had to find that idea of natural nature within myself. So your communication, I was born into parents that fought. I was born into two parents that were very well-to-do because my father was a go-getter, but he wasn't home a lot. But when he came home, there was chaos. So that chaos crashed in with my mom and my dad, the people that birthed me. And then there was a crash, and communication was out the window. What is it for me when all of a sudden I'm feeling that in my day-to-day living, and this natural, almost initial support? Maybe it's my husband not calling me. Maybe it's a partner that left me. Maybe it's understanding of communication, that somebody's speaking really loud and I get scared. Maybe it's somebody being really mean and I get scared. It jolts my natural immunity. It jolts my consciousness. It jolts my relationship to myself. And that's what I want you to study and understand about your own natural immunity. You have to go back to that initial plan of your parents birthing you, right? What was that initial support for you? What was the communication around you? Because the word was the word, right? That word is so key to our life. And I'm going to go back again to the second milestone, the second phase of life, and your personal responsibilities. So my personal responsibility in the second milestone was I became a mom at a very early age. But I had been a caregiver to my parents deeply in my responsibilities. So I had always cared for others. I remember a day when my husband was playing with my children, and I felt jealous, and I was like, where is that coming from? And I realized my children got to play, but I never got to play as much as my children in their own home. Now, I played plenty when I was a child. My parents gave me plenty of places to play. But that responsibility of mine was so, I wanted to be the perfect mom. I wanted to not give my kids any of that chaos that I had as a child. I wanted them to have healthy living versus unhealthy living. That I was born in the most beautiful home, and my parents bought a home when I was 9. I moved into the most 14-room house with 6 fireplaces, but I felt very alone in that big house. So the house became my spirit. The house and I wrote a song about that initial. I'm not sharing my stories with you to tell you about me. I'm sharing my stories to tell you about you and what was your responsibility in that second milestone of your life when you grew up a little bit, the second phase of life, after your 20s. There's a lot that happens between birth and 20. But what was the second phase of life, and what were the triggers that really brought you to your knees in the second phase of life? Because your second phase of life, you're spiritually starting to grow, 20s, 30s, 40s, right? Those 20s, 30s, 40s give you a huge piece of information. They give you an information that your understanding of being a human being and what happened to you. If you're watching as a child, remember that first milestone is your preciousness right now. And you can do the same work that I'm doing now in my 60s. So as I bring natural immunity to the forthright of all these discussions, don't let age come into play if you're watching this. I want you to just understand and write down what I started with this natural genealogy, geography, where you were born, and now I'm going deeper into the milestones of your life. Milestone 1 at that initial stage of your birth, and milestone 2. And I call those our personal goals because whether you like it or not, you were put into a personal goal. And I talked about that in our second video, our second PowerPoint presentation, about that personal goal of did your grandfather, my grandfather had a pharmacy. And I remember going to this pharmacy, but there was a candy store. And my grandfather gave out silver coins to every single graduating person in the school. And I can remember that story so vividly that my mother wanted to tell it often. And it was my mother's father. And he gave out a pure silver dollar to every graduating person in her school for a lot of her whole years. What did that mean to her? In her own natural immunity, her own uplift, her own grace, her own witness. Now, I've shared a lot of stories of maybe despair, but I also want to share you the positive. My mother was very happy-go-lucky. She loved giving to people. She loved giving over to, helping people. Her father did that, right? Her father gave to people, right? Now, my father's father died. My father strove to be a good businessman. He was independent. He was sturdy. He was strong. He was, very out there in the world. What was your father or your grandfather about? What was that milestone, that second phase of life about for you? Because those thoughts influenced your personal understanding of your personal goals. They came into you through, I would say, osmosis. I would say through an understanding of osmosis. I would say through an intuitive understanding. I would say through the language that you were heard as a young child and then into the second phase. This has all got to do with your natural immunity, your natural understanding of life. Your goals are all surrounding in it. And we don't look at that when we look at our own nature, our own understanding. So let's go to the next slide. I loved this slide. I just got really excited about this slide. For one, I was able to put the earth into the calculations of technology, which I believe is very huge in our world today, especially for the kids being born today into a system. They are born into a system of technology. That's why the torch has the 4 pillars: peace, health, environment, and tech. So calculations. I want you to calculate your understanding of your own immunity, your own understanding of nature, your own understanding of calculations. Our own ability to survive in the designs that have been put in place for us when we are born is so key to understanding your own personal natural immunity. It doesn't make any sense to displace yourself. Why did this one get sick and why did that one not get sick? Why did this one get something and why did somebody else get something else? Why did somebody get this and somebody else get that? If you look at seasonal understanding and understanding of organs and understanding of heaven and earth flowing through you, this natural calculation of design that you've been put into, what has been put in place for you? What is your calculation of that? Go back to this first, if you've just joined me, go back to the first slide, please, and start this over after I get done. You can continue for now, but I want you to look at this. Our ability to make choices in a world that complicates the human experience. Whew, it's huge, right? What are our calculations to make just a choice for our families today? What is our calculation just to make one day work? 1 minute work. It might be somebody like Wahid and his family, and Takwa was born with spina bifida, and their family has been with that since the first time they had a baby. Huge. I love Wahid and Rizwana. They're one of the most precious people. They are so dear. But when you look at what they've been in that complicates their human experience, it's huge. I don't have any relationship to that. I feel every day, like when I pray for Takwa, when I pray for her understanding of family, but then you look at Takwa and who she is as a human being. She's way beyond all of us, like as far as consciousness, right? Her consciousness was born. And who was it? What was the ability to make choices in the world? From her own human experience. She's been speaking for peace since she was 6, guys. 6 years old, she started speaking for peace. Her understanding of the world was very different. So her understanding of the natural process, the natural immunity of her own being was huge. She is so empathetic for how her parents have cared for her, and so compassionate. So our resourcefulness of our deeper witness to others, right? Her resources and her resourcefulness of just staying alive. My own of just staying alive. Your own for just staying alive. What resources or resourcefulness? I want you to write down the positive things that was your uplift of resourcefulness. What was your resourcefulness to be who you are today? Give yourself a pat on the back. Give yourself a hug. Give yourself a witness to how you treat others, how you are with others. What is our own worthiness? I want you to claim it. I want you to claim your worthiness today. It's a world filled with these deep understandings of our own innate nature, of what we have been born into as a society, as a people, and then our quantitative and qualitative calculations. We have to look at the quantitative and qualitative. Now, if you look at science, the quantitative and qualitative calculations are based in chemistry. But chemistry is always changing. Chemistry changes, just like what I've talked to you today. So as I move into this next stage, the world is abound around us. The world is a huge globe with technology and understanding around us. Our quantitative and qualitative calculations is coming from a huge resource now. Our resourcefulness, just to find, maybe it's as nurses, we all kind of feel like people are just, that's a person that's just making their own calculations about their own health, when they really didn't know maybe some of the science behind it. But as a young mom, I had a child that had allergies, my firstborn. When I look at my quantitative or qualitative idea around that, where did that come from for me to ask, why did he have allergies? I'm going to get a drink here. What was my son's relationship to allergies? What allergies did was it kept me and my husband up all night, from a child that screamed from the day he was born all the way through to 6 months. And then I started changing my own personal diet. But I changed it through all of my own personal calculations. So you have to calculate your own personal relationship. So back to these different questions that I ask of you, your own ability to survive in the design that was put in place for you, your own ability to make choices in a world that complicates it, right? We didn't have money as a young couple, my husband and I. He was a golf pro. We didn't have a lot of resources. So I had to figure it out, you know? I wasn't thrilled about what doctors were doing. They were just putting him on, allergy medication that basically he would get ear infections, and it was from his allergy. And his ear infections were saying that he had an infection. They didn't look at the bigger picture. So I had to go back and look at my own quantitative and qualitative understanding of his own health. What was my resourcefulness? I had to look internally what natural immunity was given. What was his own natural immunity? What was happening in his little body? And for the next year, I looked at it from a very deep, rich place of calculation of natural immunity. And how could I bring him back to a natural place where he wasn't affected? So Naeem says, we need to save the earth as it is constantly changing due to haphazard development. World need to adopt sustainable development model for safe and clean environment for future generations. 100%, 100%, Naeem. Yeah, but you look at this, right? And you look at all the flu that's happened. I think you're based out of Pakistan. I'm not sure. But if you look at Pakistan, I've gone to Pakistan twice. I've gotten really sick in my lungs from the chemicals. And so if I look at Fatima Aziz and what she's done in Karachi, she's done tremendous work. So I hope you support her if you're from Pakistan. If you're from a different country, let me know. But I think when we start looking at natural immunity, you have to look at understanding of many different understandings, because emotional thinking, theological thinking, understanding your relationship to God, your relationship to your own faith, your relationship to having trust, your relationship to having an understanding of trust, it all comes back to that survival that I talked about a couple slides back. What is your mechanism for making good choices? What is your mechanism for getting chemicals out of your house, for instance, right? I use the product Thieves, and I've been trying to get it to Pakistan because I know it's so important. I brought it to Pakistan with me with my group of people that I studied around as an oil. But when you start looking at quality and qualitative and quantitative understanding, you have to look at calculations of how to bring a situation that could be supportive, but how can it make a difference? And I heard so much of this as a young mom because I started an organic food business, right? I had the organic food business, but when I started to try to sell it and make money from natural foods, my idea of natural foods versus this one, I really was eating very clean, but the world was eating a lot of salt. So their taste buds were from a salt-based taste. I was coming from a very clean diet, eating very quality life. Salt is key to blood quality. So I believe in salt. But the way that Americans eat salt was so extreme that it's making many, 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 many people sick. So when I go to the health food store and I try to make money, I had to change my idea of how to put salt into my food so that people would just eat the food that I was making. So I'm changing my ideal for the world's ideal. And what does that do? I separate myself. So this idea of separation is all over. We have the world divided right now. We have the world and our calculations divided from simple calculations. So we have to bring it together from looking at a wider view of natural immunity, of a understanding of natural under my own personal calculations believes that our resourcefulness of deeper witness to others is key to helping the next wave of generations. Our worthiness of really going deep, not into just some chemistry that might turn us to say, yes, I better do this. Because then we're just following a herd, and it's herd mentality. We have to go deeper to look at our own nature, our own resourcefulness, our own worthiness, our own quantitative and qualitative calculation. In order for you to understand science, you can't just go to sustainability without looking at it from a whole view of where will it structure itself? Who will buy the product? You know, here's my husband and I wanting to make a really nice product. I go to sell it, but I can't sell it. I have to change it for the world. This is happening all the time. We're changing our ideas because we just have to survive. To survive, I have to change my idea here, which is actually my ideal of wanting to give the people and nature a very quality of life, right? So it all comes into calculations. And our technical advancement can help us move into understanding if we don't walk over people. If we don't walk over, I'm just going to hop over here and just sell salty food. I can't just do that. So I educate, right? I open myself up to education. So I give classes on diabetes. I give classes because if you have too much salt, you have too much sugar. If you have too much salt, you have heart disease and you hardened arteries. If you have too much salt, being a meat eater and a cheese eater, it's going to add to the compactedness of your organs. So your intestines don't contract and expand, contract and expand, contract and expand. This is one of the issues of just looking at science, and I'm going to put you on a no-salt diet because your heart's bad. This isn't about no-salt diet. It's about a quantitative, qualitative look at all the areas of why this person's heart. Were they born into a home where their heart had to compensate from the chaos? Were they born into a home of their idea of being so pressured that they had to eat and they ate a lot of sugar and they became diabetic? Were they born in a home of, very extremes and they have a mental health issue? Were they born into a relatedness of extremes and just to get by they had to survive instead of just live? So our natural immunity is based on all of these calculations. We can't just look at it from a chemistry point of view or an intellectual point of view. We have to look at it from a much greater view today. That's why I'm doing this coursework. I hope that made sense. Let's go to our next slide. There's a couple more slides and then we'll end for today. So this slide I love. All of us have nature, right? All of us. We all have nature. Nature brings us to our knees if we look at it closely. In this picture, you can look at the moss growing on the one side of the stream and then the moss on the stones. The forest is filled with beautiful, soft moss. I don't know if you've touched moss in the forest or taken your shoes off and walked on moss. It's one of the most precious. I love moss. But then you look at algae, and if there's stagnation, right? If there's stagnation in a pond of water, the green algae grows on the top and it's actually toxic. So algae itself has its own understanding of two sides. And I want you to look at nature for two sides of the coin. A very expansive side and a very contracted side, a very understanding of nature, looking at it from all that we've already looked at. You can learn a lot from just nature. And if you can look at nature from a very deep place, the clean environment that Naeem is sharing with us, the safe and clean, look at this beautiful cleanliness, right? In nature herself, right? She is giving us a clean spirit if you go to nature. But in most of the world, we don't have clean drinking water today. What happened there, guys? What happened that we don't have clean drinking water for our kids? What happened? Pride, greed, trauma, dilemma, the qualitative, quantitative relationship to nature, this beautiful place, versus greed, pride, pain, struggle, making sure that my food could be sold, putting too much salt. How many people did I affect by putting too much salt, not standing with my own values? It's so minute on how we affect. I don't think we realize how much we affect one another. And we're going to open this up every Saturday. I'm going to try to teach every Saturday at 10 o'clock. I was a little late today because of my technology problems. Sorry about that. But every Saturday I'll teach. And I'm going to go into deep on a Zoom class during the week if you want to join me, probably for deeper discussions about your own personal needs. I can go into a lot of different areas. So when we look at nature and we look at the beauty, there's a deep divide inside our own ability to assess our own body, our own mind, and our own spirit through natural immunity. We have to look at understanding of going deeper within our own understanding. If you look at this globe, this is such a perfect picture of what we each experience. I want to tell you that as we move into understanding the world that we're in right now, we've heard body, mind, and spirit through all kinds of, understanding of natural way of life. But when I see natural immunity going so upside down, our ability to make choices that are of the whole versus not the whole, of the understanding of individuation and separation, of understanding solitude versus chaos, understanding peacefulness. If I'm looking at my own inner peace, I have to go deep inside and I have to assess my own body, mind, and spirit. And in order to keep equilibrium, I have to stay really close to my own inner dive, because your inner dive will give you that witness of some of those things that I've already shared today. I hope you understand that this is not something to go all of a sudden, oh, this is really important from just what I'm teaching, but I really want you to look at why I have looked at Torch as a shared platform. I didn't do it just because. I did it because there was a strong understanding of my compassion for the world, my curiosity of the world, my understanding of wonder, the quality of life that I want for my ancestry, my grandkids, my kids, and deep understanding of simplicity of these. If you look at the picture of the flower, if you look at flower, I want you to look, the next time you're close to a flower, just stay with the flower. Just look at the intricacies of a flower. We have been given the most beautiful things here. Look at a flower and just see, what is it? What's the quality of it? Does your heart feel compassion if you just look at a flower? Can you think about wonder of the flower? Can you think of the curiosity? Can you think of the simplicity? It's all embedded in each one of us. This deep witness of natural immunity, of nature herself, of nature and understanding the quantitative, qualitative parts, the survival parts, the relationship parts, the deep parts of ourselves. It's each of us individually, and yet we make up a whole. And if you keep that spark alive within yourself, you'll find the resources of understanding natural immunity in a greater way. So it wasn't about the torch for this, it was about sharing why I looked at it from a point of view of knowing that nature herself gives us so much. Nature herself gives us so much. So here's a bunch of carrots. If you look at carrots, there's an expansion part of the leaf, the structure, and they're beautiful to make sesame condiment. If you take the greens and you saute them in sesame and you add toasted sesame to them and you add some water, they become so delicious. The carrot themselves is so good. Now, if you look at the elements that grew the carrot, the elements are all within carrots. The earth, the wind, the water, the fire is the sun, the metal is the earth, the actual process. Where did the carrot need to grow in order to be a carrot? Where did the understanding of earth, where the carrot was held? How did the wind affect this carrot? How did the water and the nourishment help the carrot grow? How did that innate sunshine bring into the deep witness and the fire, the sun, the brightness, help these amazing carrot tops shoot up? Shoot up! How did it happen? Natural immunity, for me, doesn't come from a chemistry petri dish. Natural immunity comes from our innate nature herself that's given us life, that's given us witness, to given us the deep PowerPoint of our life. She is ever giving. Nature is ever giving. I don't care what scientist looks at nature and what immunity that we have and what anything gives. We have to look at it ourselves individually and look at the deep, deep understanding. If you as a human being are given a good balance of understanding of nature and natural immunity, of being born into an earth that's held, to having the winds of life not knock you over, to having the nourishment of water, the fluidity of life, to having the sun come deeply around you, and the deep, deep holding of metal, that deep, the stones, the earth herself is strong, but she's also movable. There are ways of looking at natural immunity that are much greater than ourselves. So as I bring these series to the next phase, the next understanding of nature, I hope you'll join me in this walk through the fall. I'm going to be looking at transmutation. Transmutation, I'm going to read one statement out of this book, Biological Transmutations by C.L. Kevron. He says, one could fill pages with quotations of this kind, and even with works on this theme, emanating from scientists from all over the world and showing that nature does not obey our physico-chemical laws. For nature does not work according to simplified conditions that prevail in laboratories where the evidence is discovered from which we deduce the laws. I'll read it one more time. One could fill pages with quotations of this kind, and even with works of this theme, emanating from scientists from all over the world and showing that nature does not obey our physicochemical laws. For nature does not work according to the simplified conditions that prevail in laboratories where the evidence is discovered from which we deduce the laws. I'm going to end here. I think there might be one more slide. Let me look. That was the last. So that's my first coursework in natural immunity. I've been working a lot on this subject for weeks and looking at it from understanding your own way that you will choose to live. You will look at it from many different aspects of your life. You will look at it from many different ways that you can be forthright in your own health. You'll look at it from different ways of understanding yourself. But natural immunity is a much larger discussion. And I think we must open ourselves to the possibilities of a greater look. So let's see what comes this week. I hope you join me next Saturday. I'll be teaching every Saturday, and hopefully by September, I'll probably open up this course for individuals that want to go deep into their own understanding of what I shared today. And I'll help you wade through some of those areas, and it might help you go forward in your own thinking. So we thank you all for coming today. We thank you all for being part of the descriptions of a class that I'll be teaching all fall called Natural Immunity. It's my writing in my doctorate that I'm working on it. It's my understanding of culture and cultural awareness. So I think next Saturday's class will move into some of the cultural awarenesses of how we can look at natural immunity. So please watch this. It'll be on my YouTube if it's not on Facebook. I'm moving over to a non-censored site as well with some of my material. So I can speak what I really want to speak. I hope you've enjoyed the little tiny look into your own natural immunity. If you haven't seen the whole video, please go back and listen and write down your genealogy, your geography, what your mother ate, what your father ate, where did they come from, what did they do in order when you were born. Take it serious, and we'll go to the next step next Saturday, okay? And this will be our class for the fall. And I will hope that you'll join me. And I hope you share this out so that others can take a look and take a moment of time just to take that witness of what it takes to look at nature within you, your own natural immunity, your own preciousness. And remember, I'll leave you with this, which I started with. It's a witness of knowing when wisdom is beside you. It's a witness where night and day greet. And it was a witness of the beautiful gifts of man and woman when they meet. Okay? Blessings, light, love to all of you. And keep to the deep witness, the torchlight in your heart. It's a big time to be alive. It's a precious time to be alive. That torch that you light up and the direction that you go for the next future generations is crucial right now. I open to this beautiful country that I've been born into called the United States. I open to the possibilities that my parents brought me into exactly what I needed to know. And I open to the experiences that life gave me, to my own nature, to my own natural immunity. And if I'm not with you on any given day, or you're not with me on any given day, it's okay. Because life separates itself sometimes. And life dissipates and comes back together. Dissipates and comes back together. That is our nature. That is our natural immunity. That is our witness to this life. And if you can understand a little bit of your own relationship to create the deep wonder, the deep passion, the deep curiosity of every person you meet this week, I would so appreciate that. Because every single human being needs love. Every single human being needs your love, your kindness, and your compassion. Have a blessed day. May the light shine. May you bring it to the fullest awakened moment that you can. Love you so much. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being part of the first section of natural immunity. I'll see you next Saturday at 10 a.m. Okay? My commitment. Hold me to it. Thank you.